And don't forget, you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate if you left a fabulous review on Apple Podcast. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support. And now, let's get back to the episode. Well, welcome back, podcast friends. Right before the break, David and I were talking with you about what to do with your space and how to go about, basically design-wise. What can you do with a space and how to think about what to do with it, right? That pretty much sums it up, right, David?
Exactly.
So now I really want to get in with you some examples, right? So maybe like the second part of this show, we can really divide it up with someone who might be on a tighter budget, some things or ideas or little pieces of advice that you can give our listeners about how to cut corners but still have just an absolutely beautiful space. And also, too, give our listeners who do have a nice, generous, lucky budget what you've seen that's just some really creative ways to do a wow factor. Put you on the spot there, huh?
Exactly. I'm just thinking many directions. And I'm just going to make one comment about, we talked about using a space that is a non-wedding venue space. If you do that, make sure you have the right other professionals. You have a caterer who's an off-site caterer, not a restaurant that has done a little bit of off-site. This, in the world of catering, if you never done catering that's called off-site catering, which means you have nothing, that it's like working in a war field, you really need to have someone if you're in a non-venue type of space. You can't have Aunt Mary also cater your event. You can, but it's a really different feel that you will want to have. Budgeted design can be so many different things, and what's a low budget, what's a high budget. I just did my nephew's wedding in the Midwest. Fabulous 1920 brick building. It used to be the poultry building at the Illinois State Fairgrounds. Reasonably priced. You could get in 12 hours a day before. You had 12 hours a day of the wedding, and you had 4 hours to break down on Sunday. Dream job. But the uncle paid the bill for decor. And
also, too, you made the uncle cut down a good portion of his income with those corn stalks.
Exactly. So it was there's lots of ways to save money. Ceremony, reception, both in the same space.
Oh, so if you have your ceremony and your reception, you are saving money. I know some of the answers, but can you tell your listeners why you're saving some money?
Churches, other buildings charge a fee.
Transportation to and to the church, to the flow. Also, if you're a Catholic, time frames, they don't just let you pick a time. And sometimes the time is 2:00 in the afternoon. So you now have married at 2 to 3, and your wedding doesn't start at 6. Then what do you do with your guests? When you also plan a wedding, yes, it's your day. It's supposed to be fabulous, and it's all about you and the groom. But you also have to be a gracious host and be considerate about your guest. And that's a whole nother pod talk about how to be a proper guest at a wedding. Oh.
But that's a whole nother day.
So funny you say that, because Dan has been telling me, I don't know if you must have talked to him or you just ESP on that.
No.
He has been telling me.
It's a great idea.
He has been telling me we need to talk about this. Every time we shoot a wedding, or sometimes after he shoots a wedding, I'll get a text from him. I'll be like, can we just please talk about on a podcast about how to be a good guest? So we will deliver, David. We will. Maybe I'll make you come back in for that one. So no, you're spot on with there. It's yeah. So going back to the couple I keep bringing up in this episode, and it's only because they're fresh in my mind because I've just been emailing them. They are a same-sex couple. That's why they want, for them, the reason is why they want a smaller wedding is they have hid their relationship for 8 years, and they have finally had the guts to come out and just do this. And the reason why they have 20 people is they are deciding to only invite really the people who are supporting them.
right? And for them, it's really, really, really important to it's the ceremony that's important for them. That's what's really important, because that is the day for them, is the fact that, yes, they love each other and they've been together for 8 years, but they are choosing this day for their ceremony. And remember, I was telling you that they're looking for a place out of the box that will have a proper ceremony location, rain or shine. And they are going to decorate it, and they want to make sure that installation can go either indoors and outdoors. So it's just about figuring out what's important to you, but also, too, they do not have an extravagant budget. It's very tight.
Well, with that couple, my suggestion would be to them is that you find a florist designer who can go on the fly, as in not do anything until the day before, till you know that you're going to be inside or outside. Because you can completely use the same flowers but use different vessels, do different style, do more mass outside and do more delicate inside. Whoever they pick as a florist should be willing to say, all right, we're going to order these flowers, and then on Wednesday we're going to decide if it's inside or outside. And then can come up with what's best for either direction.
See, this is why I have you on this show. That is like a great little piece of nugget that you just gave somebody.
And there's a lot of little florists. You don't have to be a huge company. There's a lot of that will be able to do that. Even some of the big companies would do that too, because you also give them freedom to be expressive and to design.
Well, what else do you have for us? You have a wealth of knowledge over here, David. What about somebody that has a higher budget? What are some things that you have done over your many years that just really, just still to this day, give you this wow factor? I mean, I know you were on another episode and we talked about linens. Linens in itself are very important.
I think wow factor for me is linens, consistency, that the cocktail hour has the same type of. I take that back. Cocktail hour can be a completely different feel than the wedding reception if it's different areas. Or, if you're doing garden around the pool, that could be a whole different concept than you do walk into the tent. That could be something completely different. But is linens, flowers, of course, and food is my three high priorities. Unique linens, I'm a pattern person. Flowers, we see those huge installations that in the ceiling of the tent, at the entrance. I think sometimes they do too many. Over the head table, I think is great, or the entrance. I rather have better food, better service, than spend the money on the florals. And I've been in the flower business since I've been 16 years old. I first did plastic flowers. That's how old I am, for funerals and cemeteries. But I think using the right, I think the wow factor in a really fabulous wedding is control. You do the right linens. You do the right amount of flowers. You don't become over the top. Once again, I go back to it's about the wedding. It's about the ceremony. It's about the commitment to each other. So I think a fabulous over-the-top wedding does not have to be large. It could be the right linen napkin, monogrammed. It could be the perfect flowers. It could be your favorite dessert brought in from New York City. It's all that personalized stuff that makes it really wonderful. And I think, going back, flowers, unique flowers. Now you can do any type of flowers you want. Peonies are really springtime. But if you're getting married in November and you really have to have peonies, you can get them.
Yeah, because there's so many flower farms now.
But they're going to be out. They're going to be pricey, but you can get them.
Right.
If you really want a big show and lots of flowers, work with the florist and use things that are in season.
That's okay. So going back down now to people on a tighter budget, you talked about having everything in one space. That's another thing is think about your florals being in season. It's always going to lower the cost. So you talk to your florist and say, what is in season? And correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of florists, if you bring them a picture of a flower and you say, I love this, and that's not in season, they can tell you a flower that looks, or just gives you the same feeling.
Exactly. Or maybe it's the color aspect. Maybe you don't care about the flowers, but you love this blushy pink. Don't do blushy pink because it's done out too much.
Fair.
Now I'm seeing lots of color, which makes me so excited.
Yes, with everything in decor, we've talked about this before too. It's a pendulum. It goes one way and it swings the other. And yes, color is definitely, dynamic color is coming back. Same thing with photography. You know, we're coming out of the COVID years, right, which was very muted tones in the editing style. Now photographers are editing back to those vibrant colors, which, talking about photography and design focus, I bet you have some opinions about that too.
I do. I mean, there's lots of great photographers out there, but most of them are hired to take pictures of you. But if you're very focused into design, you want pictures of what your tent looks like. Maybe you didn't get to see the tent before people started sitting down. Make sure that you have your photographer do design shots. What the bar is, what the specialty drink looks like. And maybe it's not the photographer, maybe it's the second shooter. But just so someone captures the aspect of the feel of the wedding, of the receptions, of the flowers, all that little detail work that you want to see and keep a remembrance of. I hire a separate photographer because I want certain detail shots, and I didn't pay for the photographer, and I don't want to take that away from the bride. So if it's a special wedding, I will hire someone just to come in and do the shots that I want. Get them in, get them out, and gone. Then I'm not bothering the photographer saying, did you take this shot? Do you have this picture? Because some brides don't care that don't want detail shots. But if you want detail shots of your reception, of your chuppah, of your ceremony, make sure you state that to the photographer, because sometimes they just take pictures of you, which is what they're there for.
And you know what? I'm going to chime in.
I know you have an opinion.
I have an opinion. I am so happy you said that. So, again, I'm only speaking on my personal experience, but for the listeners, just take this with a grain of salt, but it's very important. And every photographer is different, so how you work with them is different. But I can tell you, as a photographer, please do not assume that your photographer knows what you want. There is nothing wrong with, like David, you said, communicating with your photographer and telling them, this place is really special to me, or the decor is very special to me. And I want to make sure we capture all the details, or like, for example, I keep bringing Dan up, but for Dan, where he's getting married in the gymnasium, that actual gymnasium is special to him. So as a photographer, we want to make sure we photograph the outside too. I mean, yes, for some people it's a building, but for him it's not. There's something else very special. So my point is, as a photographer, there's nothing wrong with letting your photographer know, and don't assume that they know that certain things are important throughout the day. You don't need to give them a list of, photograph the napkins, photograph this. If you're working with a true professional, then they know what needs to be photographed. But again, you got to make sure you're working with a true professional. So you might want to start by giving them the list. I know for me, lists make me cringe. Not lists of family members and people that I need to know, but like, I don't need to be told I need to photograph the napkins or the straws, but I've been doing this for 20-something years. However, starting with a list is very important to me. And then I can reassure them, I understand all this, but we're on the same page. So giving your photographer a list or letting them understand what is important to you, you need to start with. And like I just said, if lists make me cringe, I mean it in the most loving way, because what that allows me to do is they give me a list and I look at that list and I say, there's some things on there that I'm like, okay, this is important to me. And then I educate my clients. And there's some things where, like, don't worry, I'll get the memorial table. I'll get all of these things. But the point is, it starts the communication. So yes, it's very important. If you're listening to this episode, most likely they're designed, it's very important to them. And just tell your photographer, because that's who's going to capture. I can tell you too, going back, again, here we go, back to my wedding, but, it's my experience. I did a lot with my decor. My wedding was very detail-oriented, a lot of decor. Even the professionals I worked with still to this day say there was just a lot of details, which funny when you were talking about you keep it simple. I was like, I didn't keep it simple. Doesn't mean I went all out on these big installations. It's just there was a lot of moving parts, a lot of things I wanted there. I mean, everything from I had a table set up of my favorite candy and my husband's favorite candy, and we had it there just for the guests to enjoy. Just a little table of candy. But my point is there was a lot of moving parts, and I hired a very well-known, world-renowned photographer, and I got some solid photos from that day. But there is one thing that I thank God I brought Dan in, because I did have Dan also there photographing my wedding, because I knew the photographer I hired concentrates more on the pictures of us, and he's just more of what's the word I'm looking for, David? He's just more
in tune to
the moments. So I brought Dan in to get the candids, and he captured my event space and all the details, like even from the cake. Like I had on the back side of the cake, my husband's a Florida State fan, right? So I had a little Florida State guy sticking out at the back of the cake. That was just, my token to my husband. Isn't that terrible? I was like, here you go, I'll put a Florida State, because it was up to him. Everything would have been Florida State, right? So I was like, oh, just stick a guy. But I want to remember that. I want to remember that I had that little guy there. And so Dan came in to make sure that was all captured. Yeah.
And you're talking about, but if you bribed with a good budget. And what I'm seeing that's trending right now is a lot of interior design aspect of it. Tell. As in your cocktail hour is just not stand-up cocktails and cocktail tables. You have lounges and those carpets and those cheese. You don't have a cheese table, but every little coffee table has a little mini cheese board on it. So it's more like you're entertaining in your living room aspect of it. And then, and you're moving into the dining area, and there's dining tables, but there's also banquettes. And it's a much more restaurant, hotel, lobby feel right now. Nice hotels, four-season hotel type feel to it, that it's just not a sea of round tables. It's round tables and banquet tables and maybe some upholstered dining chairs instead of just Chiavari chairs. So really coming into a home interior design aspect is where I'm seeing some of the really high-end weddings going that way.
Exactly. And you talked about having the crudité boards on different tables. I have been seeing that a lot happening at more of my higher-end weddings, which what that does, too, yes, on a design standpoint, it looks beautiful because food is just lovely when it's displayed beautifully. But it's also a flow. You don't have a ton of people all around one station. So you're able to allow people to spread out and enjoy the space. You talk about furniture and lounge furniture. For our listeners, do not underestimate that. We even at a traditional venue, right? You can go in and you can rent chairs and couches and pillows and carpets. We've been down. There's a very popular hotel on Goat Island that we photograph a lot at, and just our couples who bring in the lounge chair in that cocktail hour space, which is just a hotel lobby. It just makes it like a more comfy feeling.
Exactly. Since you've been sharing your wedding,
yes, please.
I'll share mine because your couple sounds like a lot like me and my husband Brian. We've been together 36 years, been married 5. Midwestern families. We got married 5 years ago, Fort Lauderdale, friend's house, 6 of us, but we live streamed the ceremony.
Oh.
We did a whole, I think there was 150 people invited to live stream. We live streamed the ceremony. Didn't have to pay airfare. Didn't have to buy them food.
Fair.
Didn't have to do anything. Get to enjoy the ceremony aspect of it. And then after that, we said goodbye, shut them down, and then we had a 12-course dinner for 6 people.
I love that. That sounds perfect like you, because you talked about how the food's all important.
So even I understand how that couple, the ceremony is so important. We wanted to share it to all our friends and family, but we didn't want – and that wasn't about the cost. We just didn't want to impose, because our families are from Indiana, Illinois. We have friends in Florida. We have – it's
a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot to ask. For me, I think it's a lot to ask people
yes.
to come for that that the ceremony was the only thing that was important to us. So we did it. We live streamed it, and then said goodbye and shut them off and had dinner.
I love that. You do sound like my couple, because the other thing they're doing is they're doing the ceremony. They're going to have some drinks, and then they're going to shut them off. And then what they're going to do is they're not having the traditional dancing, but they are going to have their dance by themselves. I will be there to capture it, and just outside, al fresco, hopefully, just them.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can include a lot of people without including a lot of people, if that makes sense. Like,
yes.
We invited 150 to watch, and I think we had almost everyone did. And it was a Sunday morning.
I love it. Ooh, speaking of Sunday morning, so you had a 3-course brunch meal? Is that what you did?
We started dinner at 1.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't brunch. There was nothing really brunchy about it. It was just lots of food. Private chef out of Miami.
Yeah.
It was just,
top notch.
Top notch and lovely.
I love
and
it.
Our friend's house, who's an interior designer, is impeccable. So it was like,
that's just perfect for you, David.
Perfect, So it was great.
I love it. It's funny. The only reason why I asked you if it was brunch is Dan's going to do a brunch at his wedding. And so that's another way to save some money, too.
I love brunches.
Yes.
I love brunches after the fact. I just love brunch food. But wedding on a Sunday and a brunch, it's lovely. You do the ceremony, you do the brunch, you do a little day drinking.
Yep.
And, they all go home. If you have, college friends in, then you could go bar hopping or.
Did you read Dan's mind? That's what he's doing. He's doing a beautiful brunch and, having all his friends and family there. And then they're all going. And then at night, he's going to a local bar that's very important to them. Once again, you notice a theme for him. It's the location is very important, where his friend's band's going to play, and he's going to have all his friends come and party.
Yeah. And it won't be that busy as it's Sunday.
Right.
Or hopefully there's a private, a little corner that you could set yourself up in.
And so before we do the wrap-up question, right, I want to get as much knowledge from you as I can for our listeners. You talked a little bit about your nephew's wedding. I will, for the listeners, have some pictures, if it's okay with you, on our show notes to show some visuals of what you're talking about. Can you just give us some quick, things that you did there to keep, because they had a tighter budget. And then if you could also then, on the other side of the coin, and maybe you can share with me some pictures that you've had your photographer, because you talked about having a photographer go out to your events, of another couple who had a larger budget and what you've done to really elevate their level, their wedding too.
My nephew had food stations. We did disposables, but we did all bamboo, so it all looked alike. It all had a brown tone. The building was very rustic, so it all fit in. Even the silverware was disposable, but I preset it on the table like it was real silverware. It was a barbecue theme, so I did real napkins, real cotton napkins, because you can't use thousands of paper napkins over polyester. It just doesn't work with barbecue aspect of it.
Stop right there. See, you take your knowledge for granted. A true designer thinks about the logistics and the execution. So you just said it's a barbecue. You can't have paper napkins at a barbecue.
No, you can, but you have tons of them. Tons of them.
That would be your centerpiece. It's a pile of napkins of just people's barbecue all over it, crumpled in piles.
and it was stations and it was barbecue because their guests are not fancy people. They're down home, good family friends. They didn't want to make the bride wanted it pretty, wanted it to look like a wedding, but really wanted to have fun.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So she wanted the look of a wedding, but a really down home party. And she got both of those.
Yes.
And, we did inexpensive linens that were rented. The venue has really ugly chairs. I'm not a big proponent of chair covers, but it fit the budget, and I color blocked it, and you could never known that they were spandex chair covers.
What do you mean by color blocked it? I know what you mean, but because we're going to share those pictures, and it's spot on what you did. So what do you mean by that?
So I had 3 colors of linens. I had ivory, sage, a terracotta, and a pumpkin, let's say, and I matched the chair covers with the linens. So there wasn't more. It was not busy. So a green table had green chair covers. A terracotta had terracotta. The napkins were all the same on all the tables, so there was a through line of terracotta on all the tables.
And that's why, if you go, for the listeners to go look at these pictures, when you look at the pictures, those chair covers do not stand out because you, quote unquote, color blocked it.
And if you're in the Midwest, they're all available in my sister's garage. I took nothing home.
Fair. Hey, your nephew's father will be really happy to get some of his money back.
And then on the higher end, a lot of customization. Mm-hmm. It really personalize it. Once again, I go back to the napkins, the monogram napkins, but really personalize meanings of things. Florals that have remembrance to you.
And also had candles. So candles in general for centerpieces can keep the cost down a little bit lower.
It can. If they're LED, they can keep the costs down lower. Real candles at a wedding, they can be cheaper. But there's a great video online right now on Instagram from a couple of florists about why are candles so expensive. And it's because you got to put
the labor.
The labor.
The labor.
Labor. It's the cleaning of the chimneys. It's cleaning the candlesticks. It's picking them up, bringing them down, breakage.
So that trumps my myth.
Yeah, I mean, they are, but there's a lot of labor to real candles, and there's a lot of places you can't use real candles. So if you use like real tapers, they become very expensive because of the process, not because of the candles, because of the delivery, setup, breakdown, and all of that. If you haven't seen it, it's a really funny Instagram moment of why are candles so expensive.
I'm going to have to find that video on TikTok, but I'm also laughing to myself because I'm having this visual right now. There's a florist that I had on the show. I'm not going to mention her name. You could do process of elimination, but anyway. I'll never forget, we showed up to a venue at Glen Manor. You brought up the Glen Manor. And she's running around, and she's huffing and puffing underneath her breath, right? And she's just, she's all upset. And I'm like, what is wrong? I'm like, it's only 1 o'clock. Like, your day hasn't even begun. And she's like, these candles. And there was boxes and boxes and boxes of candles, and she was just putting them out, and she's sitting there, and she had to put them, obviously because they have to be in the vases, and she's like, this is why people don't understand how expensive they are. It's the candles itself were inexpensive. It's her running around for the last hour.
And then tapers, you look at them in one way, they're straight. You go around to the other table, and they're leaned in a different direction. I was lucky enough with my nephew's wedding is they had used LEDs.
Oh, okay. That's why you have them. Okay. And also, too, just on a side note, totally random note, do not put candles down your aisle of where you're getting married inside the aisle. Like, don't. And you're probably wondering why. Don't. We literally, your guests have to walk in and out of the aisle. So, yes, maybe like on the side where the chair is, but not all down the aisle. It might look really pretty in design and photos, but practicability, it's not. I will never forget, I did a wedding, and the candles were all down the aisle. It's beautiful for the photos. In came the guests. They're all sitting down. You hear crash, crash, crash. Their feet, because they're sitting down, are hitting the candles. And then what do you think happened when the bride came down with her dress? Crash, crash.
I've seen a veil set on fire.
From the candles?
From the candles. So if you do them, you do LED, other than breakage, you can do LED or just put them in the right places. But I've seen a veil catch on fire because of candles down the aisle.
Down the aisle. That's okay. So perfect. All right. So now, going back on track, we can sit here all day long. That's another podcast show. Talk about
nightmares.
Nightmares. So now we talked about your nephew's wedding, which I will share those pictures on our show notes, which you can find on my website at sarahzorla.com/podcast. And look for David's episode. But now somebody with a more extravagant budget, what are some tips or tricks that you can just start implanting in their brain to talk with you, hopefully, or another professional to do?
Use your budget wisely. Sometimes you get caught up in the too much detail. and you don't need to get into so much detail. And because, do you remember what last wedding you went to and what the flatware looked like? If it's between $1.25 a knife or $3 a knife, really think about what's it worth. I mean, you do crazy things on your head table. I'm all for that. You can go out and buy china and crystal for your head table. But when it comes down to, no one remembers what knife they used or what fork they used. Yes, you want it to work, you want it to match, but if it's between $3 a fork and $1.25 a fork, sometimes you just got to be reasonable about your thought process, unless your budget's unreasonable, like bar glassware. For the cocktail hour, I would do a nicer bar glass. But if you move into the tent and there's another bar, I would do a more basic bar glass, because by the time they get into dinner, you have lovely wine stems on your table. No one's going to care what that vodka soda is going to be in. You want a nice glass, but it doesn't have to be maybe a cut crystal that you used out in the cocktail hour when they first arrived. The first drink should be in a really lovely glass, special cut glass. End of the night,
it's just one of many drinks.
It's one of many drinks that you've had.
But you're right, that wow effect, it has already been seeded in, and then now we're moving on.
Yeah,
many drinks.
Some people want to do that wow effect throughout the evening, and you can, but do it at the point that you remember, that people remember. The first course, the first drink, the first visuals. That's the reason I like to do, if I do big floor installations, it's at the beginning, or it's up over the dance floor where you see it all the time. It's not at the mailbox as you drive in, because you wanted a marker where the house was. Because they drive through and that's done.
It's done. All right, David. So it's time for a wrap-up question. I could literally sit here and talk to you all day. For our listeners, what are some key points that couples should be considering when they're transforming their space for decor?
I think first, if you're doing a non-traditional space or a non-traditional idea or design, you have to bring in some professionals to help you execute it. You just can't count on, the retired man who's running the VFW or the Fireman's Hall.
My 90-year-old buddy over there.
So at some point you can't just, you got to bring in a professional.
Right.
And then I think the second one is, there's so many great designers out there. What makes a designer better than another designer is logistics. A lot of people can make things pretty, but pretty doesn't mean that there's the correct flow in the tent or in the building or in your flow.
Practical too.
Practical, as in, when can you come in? When can you break down? What can we hang things? Or there's there hanging points, and are the hanging points more money? Those great florists out there, great designers, but you want to find someone else that will also take care of all that logistics, especially if you don't have a wedding planner. And this is just talking as a design florist or designer, not a wedding planner who designs also. Because
Right.
as a wedding planner, she should be able to do all that aspect of it also. And the third one boils down to what's important to you, and how to divide your budget and to get the most important thing. Like your couple, who the important is ceremony. Other people, the band could be important. As in Dan, he just wants to have from morning, noon, and night to be a fun, important time to include all his right guests in the right locations. I don't know if Dan's inviting everybody to everything, or is he subdividing people, but I might even do that. Ceremonies are close friends, brunch is family and friends. Buddies could show up, but I really would like you at the bar.
Right. I can't speak for him, but from what we've discussed, I'm acting like he's not right over there producing the show, but he's not mic'd
but
up.
We're talking up.
Yeah, right. But he is actually inviting different people at different locations because the locations are catered to those guests. Like
exactly.
At night is for his buddies. His aunt and uncle probably doesn't want to sit in a bar and listen to his buddies play, but the morning is for his close family and friends, and kid-friendly. That's another thing that's been very important for Dan. And kind of going back to your third point is what's important to you. He really wants to make sure that his morning affair is very kid-friendly. Yeah, so with that said, David, thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Wedding Secrets Unveiled. You helped our listeners become one step closer to their stress-free wedding planning. Can you tell everyone where they could find you?
You can find me at dprice@depcreative.net. And I have another little gig, and you can find me at david@eedecor.com.
And for our listeners, we will have David's information on our episode show notes, which you can find on our blog and our website at sarahzarella.com/podcast. And I will also have some visuals that you can help understand a little bit about what David and I talked about today.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening to Wedding Secrets Unveiled. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you something. I encourage you to check out our website at sarahzarella.com. We love photographing while having fun, of course. Check out our podcast page on our website for our show notes along with upcoming episodes with your local wedding experts. Listen in as we help you plan your epic event. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss an episode. I would so appreciate if you left a review for us on Apple Podcasts. Even better, share it with a friend. It's a great way to show your support and let us know what you think. If you know any wedding experts that would like to be a guest, we have a link directly on our website where they can let us know. Thank you for listening.